Many today are discussing how clinical trials will look differently after the pandemic. Innovative approaches that have been developed in recent years but were stalled in experimentation have been rapidly adopted over 2020 as pandemic countermeasures, and many organizations are now making commitments to embed these approaches in their clinical trial pipelines going forward. These areas, telemedicine, decentralized trials, risk-based monitoring, remote monitoring, and others, were the next big shifts 5 to 10 years ago. While it will take time and resources to fully embed and scale these approaches into the development organizations, these are the solutions of today. For those considering planning, strategy, and investment, the question must then be to look beyond. Based on our experiences during 2020, what are the next big shifts coming to clinical trials? And why don't we start that as your first question, Craig? What are the next big shifts?
Well, it's a great question, Rick, and thank you for the setup, because I do think the research community this past year rose to the challenge around the pandemic. Absolutely. And it was really a year of adoption. But as you just pointed out from those opening remarks, this was adoption of the shifts that were happening 5 or 10 years earlier. So as we're looking forward, some of the areas that I think we'll have an opportunity to talk more about, the first will be around personalization and participation. And in the first note, we'll talk a bit about what that means from the research participants' perspective. But in the second, taking some of that same thought process around personalization and also applying that into the research site, and how will they be able to make more use of their own technology and their own infrastructure, even in the context of multi-center research. The third will start to pull us into what I think of as being the second pandemic of 2020 around racial injustice and appreciation of the importance of investing in equity. But what does that commitment start to look like? And how do we leverage the know-how in our space for how to make sustaining commitment in terms of behavior and change? The fourth, I think, is a question on a lot of people's minds, objectively looking at the incredible pace of therapeutic and vaccine development in 2020 through Operation Warp Speed, and wondering, what about Alzheimer's? What about other life-threatening, life-impacting diseases? How are we going to take the principles of Operation Warp Speed and apply them beyond the pandemic? And then finally, in the spirit of shared economies like Uber and Lyft and Airbnb, what's the shared economy that's on the horizon for clinical trials? And what are some of the signals that we can see and point to today that give us confidence that that may be part of our future and a trend to follow?
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for